rift between Lula and Milei deepens. Negotiations over a new minimum wage fail to please anyone, and more Argentines slip below the poverty line. Welcome to A Bloke in Buenos Aires, presenting news and views in English from the capital of Argentina. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. During last year's election campaign, Javier Milei liked to style himself as some kind of firebrand maverick, an anarcho-capitalist slicing through red tape with his trademark chainsaw. But up against the big guns like Massa and Bullrich, perhaps he never really expected to be elected, and felt free to voice his real opinions in public. Very honest, but not really good politics. The soon-to-be president insulted various world leaders, notably Pope Francis and President Lula da Silva of Brazil. Now, the Catholic Church is all about sin and redemption, so a suitably contrite visit to the Pope was always going to elicit forgiveness, but not so easy with President Lula. Sometimes words have consequences, and understandably affronted Lula snubbed the invitation to Milei's inauguration. So to rub salt in the wound, Milei invited Brazilian ex-president Jair Bolsonaro, Lula's arch-nemesis. On taking office, President Milei, the self-proclaimed economic genius, was faced with the reality that Brazil is Argentina's second most important trading partner, and Lula is someone that Milei will inevitably have to work with. To further widen the gap between the two men is their opposing views on the current conflict in Palestine. On Milei's recent visit, he was very supportive of Israel, although this may have been more of a personal pilgrimage as part of his ongoing conversion to Judaism. However, he did suggest moving the Argentine embassy to Jerusalem. Lula, on the other hand, has compared the current plight of the Palestinians to the Nazi Holocaust, thrown out the Israeli ambassador, and closed Brazil's embassy in Tel Aviv. As leaders of the two biggest economies in South America, both Milei and Lula have planted their flags firmly in opposing camps over this issue, while most neighbouring countries are doing their best to avoid taking sides, at least in public. It remains to be seen who will be on the right side of history. Last week, the government had two economic achievements to celebrate for January: a fall in monthly inflation from 25 to 20%, and a monthly fiscal surplus for the first time in 12 years. These numbers may look great when the Finance Minister Luis Caputo presents his spreadsheets to the visiting IMF representative, but to most Argentines they're little more than numbers. Prices continue to rise while wages don't, and that's the reality on the ground. Negotiations have been underway to raise the minimum wage, but have fallen apart due to unrealistic demands from the labour unions. Initially, President Milei refused to participate, taking the typical free marketeer view that this was something to be settled between workers and their employers, and not the business of government. However, since the government is the employer in a lot of cases, the Minister of Human Capital, Sandra Portavejo, has stepped in and decided to introduce a 30% increase spread over 2 months. This numeric increase will be completely eroded by inflation and leave no one happy. As can be imagined, union bosses are furious, and rounds of strikes are already beginning, starting with a one-day walkout by railway workers and followed by those in healthcare and more general government jobs. Schools reopen soon after the summer break, and teachers' unions are expected to strike too. The minimum wage is important because the value feeds directly into calculations for social security, welfare and pensions payments. So none of these will keep pace with rising prices until Caputo and Milei's plans start to show tangible results rather than technical successes. The failure of wages to keep pace with rampant inflation in both the public and private sector is driving more and more people into poverty. Depending on which statistics you believe, anything from 40 to 60% of Argentines are now living below the poverty line. This includes workers from the professional and middle classes, with almost 15% of the population described as destitute, and rates of rural poverty are said to be much higher. Like a lot of economic measures, these numbers can be hard to translate into reality, but what I see around me every day is very real. A year ago, I moved from the hustle and bustle of Palermo to this much quieter neighbourhood of Núñez. Before I moved, I used to see about 2 street robberies per week. Now I feel safe walking my dog at midnight. However, even in this neighbourhood, the numbers of rough sleepers is slowly rising. There's an old cinema a couple of blocks away that closed when the COVID pandemic hit. In the windows, there are still posters for the latest movies of summer 2020, and in the doorway lives an extended family of anything up to 6 or 7 people, including occasionally children. They've been here at least as long as I have and seem to be semi-permanent residents. According to the president, much of this situation is the legacy of decades of corruption and poor economic management. That may be so, but he's in charge now, and blaming the previous government for current problems, no matter how true that may be, has its limits in the public perception. Milei has forecast an economic rebound within 3 months. Whether or not that happens, he will have to shoulder the credit or blame. Every news report has some kind of bias, and it's often frustratingly difficult to get a balanced view. Ground News is a website and app that gathers all the world's media in one place so you can compare coverage. Ground News lets you see the story behind the story using data-driven analysis that looks at things like the political bias, reliability, and ownership of news outlets. To get a 40% discount off a subscription to Ground News, click on the link in the description below. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe to see more similar content. And if you want to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee in the link below. And until next time, que tengas un buen día.